A poor girl warns a millionaire. She put something in your cake. 2 hours later, during a luxurious dinner to celebrate their relationship, a millionaire meticulously prepared every detail for a perfect evening. While his partner went to the ladies' room, a homeless girl approached him and whispered, "Sir, she put something in your cake." Richard said nothing. Silently, unnoticed by anyone, he swapped the dessert plates. When Vanessa returned, what happened next left everyone paralyzed. The London skyline glittered like a diamond necklace against the night sky as Richard Blackwood adjusted his Armani tie. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Pinnacle, London's most exclusive restaurant in the city, Richard could see the Gherkin, illuminated in a soft blue glow. 52 floors above the bustling streets, Richard had booked the private lounge, strategically positioned to offer both privacy and a panoramic view few could afford. At 45, Richard embodied success. His property empire spanned 3 continents. His name adorned buildings in 12 major cities, and his personal fortune had long surpassed the £1 billion mark. However, tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight was for Vanessa. Vanessa Carmichael entered the dining room with the practiced grace of a woman accustomed to commanding attention. Her emerald gown hugged her slender figure, complementing the dark brown hair that fell over her shoulders in loose waves. At 34, she possessed both beauty and the sharp intellect that had drawn Richard since they met at a charity gala 2 years prior. "You've outdone yourself," Vanessa said, her eyes sweeping over the intimate setting. The table was adorned with white roses, crystal champagne flutes, and the soft glow of candles. "I know this is a celebration, but this is—" She paused, running her fingers over the embossed menu. "Magnificent," Richard smiled, though only half his mouth curved upwards. "Only the best for us," Richard said, pouring Dom Perignon into their glasses for another year of extraordinary moments. The glasses clinked, the crystal producing a clear, pure sound that seemed to hang in the air. The dinner progressed through plates of culinary craftsmanship: seared scallops with truffle essence, cherry reduction duck confit, champagne, sorbet to cleanse the palate. Throughout the meal, Richard found himself studying Vanessa with more intensity than usual. There was something different about Vanessa tonight. A subtle tension in her shoulders, a flicker of nervousness behind her practiced smile. "Is everything all right?" Richard asked between courses. "You seem distracted. Just overwhelmed by all of this," Vanessa replied, gesturing towards the extravagant display. "And perhaps a little anxious about my gift for you. It's not quite ready yet." Richard nodded, though doubt crept into the edges of his thoughts. In 2 years, he had learned to read Vanessa's expressions, and tonight something didn't fit. Her words said one thing, but her body language told another story. As the main course plates were cleared, Vanessa excused herself. "I just need to freshen up before dessert," Vanessa said, kissing his cheek before disappearing towards the ladies' room. Left alone, Richard sipped his wine and gazed at the city. His phone vibrated with messages from Hong Kong and Frankfurt. But tonight they could wait. Richard had built his empire by being present in every moment, reading people and situations with uncommon precision, and right now, his instincts were a silent, persistent alarm he couldn't quite define. The chef himself, Claude Jenkins, appeared with 2 covered silver cloches. "Mr. Blackwood, our special anniversary dessert, chocolate soufflé with gold leaf and raspberry coulis. Miss Carmichael mentioned it was your favorite." Richard thanked him, noting that while chocolate was indeed his preference, he had never discussed his dessert tastes with Vanessa. A minor detail perhaps, but one that registered on the growing list of small discrepancies. As Claude retreated, Richard's attention was drawn by a commotion near the restaurant's entrance. A small figure darted between the maître d' and a security guard, weaving through tables with remarkable agility. In seconds, a girl no older than 12 appeared at the edge of the private lounge, breathing heavily. She wore a worn blue hoodie several sizes too big, jeans with holes at the knees, and trainers so scuffed the brand was unrecognizable. Dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes, startlingly blue and intensely focused, locked onto Richard's with an urgency that made him straighten in his chair. "Don't eat that cake," the girl whispered, pointing at the covered cloches. "She put something in it." Richard stared at her for a moment, speechless. "What? Who are you? How? Please," the girl interrupted, her voice trembling but determined. "I heard them talking in the kitchen. She bribed someone to put something in your special dessert." "Something bad?" Before Richard could process her words or ask another question, the security guard appeared behind the girl. "So sorry, Mr. Blackwood." This girl from the street slipped in through the service entrance. "We'll remove her immediately." "Wait." Richard began, but the girl was already being pulled away. "Swap the plates," the girl urgently whispered as the guard took her arm. "When she's not looking, please." And then she was gone, dragged out of the lounge. Richard heard the manager apologizing profusely, promising such an intrusion would never happen again. Alone with the covered desserts, Richard faced an absurd dilemma. The rational part of his mind, the one that had built skyscrapers and negotiated multi-billion-pound deals, dismissed the girl's warning as nonsense. Why would Vanessa want to harm him? It was absurd, the stuff of melodramatic thrillers. Yet, another part of Richard, the intuitive side that had saved him from countless bad investments, couldn't shake the desperate intensity of the girl. Those eyes didn't lie, and there had been something off about Vanessa all evening. Richard glanced towards the ladies' room. Vanessa was still absent. With a swift movement that surprised even himself, Richard swapped the positions of the covered cloches, ensuring his now sat in front of Vanessa's seat. As he did, he noticed a small card with his name elegantly printed next to one of the cloches, the one that had originally been in front of him. He had just settled back into his chair when Vanessa returned, makeup freshly touched up, smile dazzling. "Dessert has arrived," Richard said with casual indifference, his heart racing despite his outward calm. "The chef mentioned it's a chocolate soufflé." "Your favorite," Vanessa replied, taking her seat. "I made sure they prepared it especially." With practiced ceremonial pomposity, they simultaneously lifted the silver cloches from their desserts. Identical chocolate soufflés rested before them, adorned with gold leaf and surrounded by artistic swirls of raspberry coulis. "It looks divine," Vanessa said, picking up her spoon. "Shall we?" Richard feigned taking a bite, then put his spoon down to reach for his wine glass. "This pairing is excellent," Richard commented, watching Vanessa take a generous portion of soufflé. Vanessa agreed, savoring the dessert. "It's perfect." For the next 20 minutes, Richard maintained the charade. He moved the dessert around his plate, while keeping up light conversation, asking about her upcoming charity event, discussing plans for a weekend in the Cotswolds, all while subtly observing Vanessa for any signs of change. At first, there were none. Then, as they finished their coffee, Richard noticed Vanessa rubbing her temple. "Headache?" Richard asked. "Just a slight one," Vanessa replied, pressing her fingers harder against her forehead. "Probably too much champagne." 10 minutes later, Vanessa's hands began to tremble subtly as she reached for her water glass. A fine sheen of perspiration appeared on her forehead despite the perfect ambient temperature. Richard watched all this with growing alarm and the confirmation of the unthinkable. "Perhaps we should call it a night," Richard suggested. "You don't look well." "Nonsense," Vanessa insisted, her voice slightly strained. "I'm fine. Besides, I have a surprise for you. It should be arriving any moment." As if on cue, her phone chimed with a message. Richard watched Vanessa check it, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "Everything all right?" Richard asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Of course," Vanessa replied a little too quickly, sliding the phone into her clutch bag. "Just work, always, something." But Richard had caught a glimpse of the message. Still nothing, it should have worked by now. And in that moment, as Vanessa's hand trembled and her eyes nervously scanned the room, Richard Blackwood understood that the girl from the streets with the desperate eyes had just saved his life. Richard maintained his composure with the practiced ease of a man who had negotiated high-stakes deals under pressure. His mind, however, raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Across the table, Vanessa's condition rapidly deteriorated. Her words began to slur slightly, and the tremor in her hands became impossible to conceal. "Vanessa, you are clearly not well," Richard said firmly. "I'm going to call for medical assistance." "No!" The force of her objection startled him. "I just need some air. Let's go. Let's pay up and take a walk." Her desperation to avoid medical attention only reinforced Richard's suspicions. With deliberate calm, Richard signaled the waiter for the bill while reaching for Vanessa's clutch bag under the pretext of retrieving his credit card. "What are you doing?" Vanessa asked, her voice unsteady. "My platinum card is in your bag, remember? From when you picked up the earrings this afternoon." It was a lie, but Vanessa was too disoriented to question it. As he opened Vanessa's clutch, Richard discreetly slipped Vanessa's phone into his own pocket. The waiter arrived with the bill, and Richard handed over his actual card, all while observing Vanessa's increasingly unstable condition. "Richard," Vanessa whispered, her pupils dilated. "I don't feel well." "I know," Richard said simply. "Help is on the way." Before Vanessa could protest again, Richard had already signaled the maître d', who approached with evident concern on his face. Mr. Blackwood, is everything all right? No. My companion is experiencing a medical emergency. Please call an ambulance immediately. The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos. The manager appeared. Staff cleared a path, and within minutes, the Pinnacle's exclusive sanctuary was invaded by paramedics. Richard provided concise, accurate information. Vanessa's age, the sudden onset of symptoms, her apparent disorientation. Sir, do you know if she ingested anything unusual? One of the paramedics asked as they prepared to transport her. Only what was served at dinner, Richard replied carefully. Though I believe there may have been something in her dessert that shouldn't have been there. The paramedic's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting intentional contamination? I'm suggesting you might want to run a toxicology screen, Richard said quietly, and preserve a sample of the soufflé. As Vanessa was wheeled towards the lift, Richard pulled the restaurant manager aside. I need the security footage from tonight, particularly from the kitchen and our table. There was a girl who came to warn me. I need to know who she is and how she knew. The manager hesitated. Mr. Blackwood, that would require police involvement. Then involve them, Richard said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. Because what happened here tonight was no accident. In the ambulance, Richard sat beside a semi-conscious Vanessa, her manicured hand now connected to an IV drip. His thoughts turned to the girl from the streets. Her desperate warning, her certainty, her disappearance. Why would a homeless child risk arrest to warn a stranger? How did she know? At St. Thomas's Hospital, London, Vanessa was immediately taken for treatment, while Richard was directed to a waiting room. Alone for the first time since the incident, he pulled out Vanessa's phone. It was locked, but Richard knew the code. Vanessa's birth, year and month. Something he had noticed months ago without mentioning it. The message history confirmed his worst fears. A thread with someone saved only as J contained explicit discussions about dosage, timings, and effects. Most chillingly was the message Richard had glimpsed at the restaurant, followed by increasingly frantic exchanges. J, still nothing. It should have worked by now. Vanessa. Nothing. Are you sure? Something went wrong. J, did the chef follow instructions? Vanessa. Yes, I watched him prepare it myself. J, then she should be showing symptoms by now. Unless. The last message had arrived while they were in the ambulance. You swapped the plates. Check the plates. Richard's hand clenched around the phone. There was more, much more. Scrolling back weeks in the messages, Richard found a calculated plan targeting not just his evening, but his entire fortune. References to his will, naming Vanessa as a significant beneficiary, insurance policies, offshore accounts. It all painted a picture of meticulous planning. Most disturbing were the casual references to his anticipated accident and the new life Vanessa and Jay planned afterwards. Richard had never considered himself naive, but the depth of this betrayal stunned him. 2 years of his life, of shared trust and intimacy. It had all been a sophisticated, long-term con. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Dr. Khan. We've stabilized Miss Carmichael and are running tests. Initial results suggest some kind of toxin, possibly plant-derived. Can you think of anything she might have consumed that you didn't? Only the chocolate soufflé, Richard replied. We had identical meals otherwise. Right, whatever it is, it's serious. If she hadn't received medical attention in time, the doctor left the implication hanging in the air. The police will want to speak with both of you once she's stabilized. Richard nodded. I'll fully cooperate. And doctor, I have reason to believe this was not accidental. You might want to secure her belongings. As the doctor retreated, Richard's phone rang. It was the restaurant manager. Mr. Blackwood, the police are reviewing our security footage. They've identified the girl, though not by name. She appears to be a frequent presence in the area, possibly lives on the streets near Hyde Park. Officers mentioned they've seen her at Street Jude's shelter on Marylebone Road. Thank you, Richard said. And the kitchen footage? It shows one of our new chefs adding something to a dessert marked with your name. He's been taken in for questioning. Richard ended the call and gazed out the hospital window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, a girl from the streets had saved his life for reasons Richard couldn't comprehend. Finding her suddenly seemed as important as understanding the conspiracy against him. 2 hours later, having given his statement and handed Vanessa's phone over to the police, Richard was free to leave. Detective Inspector Davies had been skeptical at first, but the phone evidence, combined with the chef's confession that he had been bribed to add special ingredients to Richard's dessert, had transformed skepticism into grim conviction. We'll need your continued cooperation, Mr. Blackwood, Detective Inspector Davies said. Miss Carmichael, or whatever her real name is, had accomplices. This appears to be part of a larger scheme. You'll have it, Richard assured her. But right now, there's someone else I need to find. It was almost midnight when Richard's Bentley pulled up outside Street Jude's shelter. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to the luxury of the Pinnacle. Here, reality was not softened by champagne and gold leaf. Richard instructed his driver, Michael, to wait and approach the entrance where a tired-looking woman was locking up. Sorry, sir, admissions are closed for the night, she said automatically, then did a double take at his formal attire. I'm not looking for shelter, Richard explained. I'm looking for a young girl, possibly 11 or 12, dark hair, blue eyes. She might have come here tonight. The woman's expression hardened. We don't give out information about our juvenile residents. My name is Richard Blackwood. This girl saved my life tonight, and I need to thank her. She may also be in danger because of it. The woman, Sister Agnes, according to her name tag, studied him carefully. Richard Blackwood, the property developer? The one building that new arts center in Shoreditch? Richard nodded. Wait here, Sister Agnes said, disappearing inside. Minutes passed before Sister Agnes returned. She's not here tonight, but I know who you're talking about. That's Lily. She comes and goes, never stays more than a night or two. Sharp as a tack, but wary of authority. Do you know where I might find her? She has bolt holes all over the West End. There's a disused newsstand near Marble Arch and Park Lane that she sometimes uses, or the southern entrance to Hyde Park. But, Mr. Blackwood, Sister Agnes's voice softened. That girl has been let down by every adult in her life. Whatever your intentions, be careful with her trust. Richard nodded, understanding the weight of the warning. Thank you, sister. As the car pulled away from the shelter, Richard made a decision. If finding Vanessa's accomplices was the police's job, finding Lily was his. Not just to thank her, but to understand why a child from the streets would risk everything to save a stranger. Dawn broke over London, painting the sky in watercolor shades of rose and gold. Richard hadn't slept. After leaving the shelter, he had spent hours searching the locations Sister Agnes had mentioned, but Lily remained elusive. Now, as his driver completed a third circuit of the southern edge of Hyde Park, exhaustion clouded his thoughts. Sir, Michael, the driver, ventured. Perhaps we should resume the search after you've rested. One more circuit, Richard insisted, and then back to the penthouse. His phone rang. It was Detective Inspector Davies. Mr. Blackwood, we've made progress. The chef confirmed he was paid £10,000 to add a specific compound to your dessert, a compound that would have caused cardiac arrest within a few hours. Richard's blood ran cold. And Vanessa? Still unconscious but stable. We've identified her accomplice from her communications, Julian Thorne, a former hedge fund manager with a history of fraud. We're tracking his whereabouts. Have you found any connection to other potential victims? That's why I'm calling. We found a list in Miss Carmichael's cloud storage. Wealthy individuals, all single, all with significant assets. Your name was third on a list of 12. 2 of the others suffered unexpected health emergencies in the last year. The implications were staggering. Are you saying this is a pattern? We believe so. A sophisticated operation targeting high-net-worth individuals with no close family ties. Miss Carmichael appears to be one of several operatives. After ending the call, Richard stared blankly at the passing landscape. Richard had built walls around himself after his wife's departure 7 years prior, focusing solely on his empire. Those walls had almost cost him everything. Sir, Michael interrupted, I think that's her. Richard looked where his driver was pointing. Near the park entrance, a small figure in a blue hoodie sat on a bench, seemingly watching the morning joggers. Even from a distance, Richard recognized the weary posture. Pull over here, Richard instructed. Wait for me. Richard approached slowly, aware that sudden movements might spook her. As he drew closer, Lily saw him. For a moment, she tensed as if preparing to flee. Then she seemed to reconsider. You swapped the plates, Lily said when Richard reached her. It wasn't a question. Yes. Richard sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. You saved my life. I need to understand how you knew. Lily studied him with eyes too old for her young face. I listen. People don't notice kids like me. We're invisible. Not to me, Richard said softly. Not anymore. My name is Richard Blackwood. I know who you are, Lily replied. Your picture's on the buildings. And you're Lily. Lily shrugged. That's what they call me at the shelter. Lily, what exactly did you hear? The girl pulled her knees to her chest, a defensive posture. I was behind the restaurant. Sometimes they throw out good food, posh people who don't finish what they order. I found a spot where I can hear the kitchen. Lily paused, choosing her words carefully. That woman, your girlfriend, she came in the back, met a man in chef's whites, gave him money, told him to put something in your special dessert. Said it was. Lily shook her head. Just that you wouldn't notice it in the chocolate. And what would it seem like? Lily hesitated. That your heart just stopped. The clinical precision of the plan made Richard's skin crawl. Why did you warn me? You took an enormous risk. For the first time, Lily seemed unsure. I don't know, just people shouldn't do that to each other. The simplicity of her moral code, despite whatever hardship had driven her to the streets, moved Richard deeply. Thank you isn't enough, Richard finally said, but I'm more grateful than I can express. Lily was clearly uncomfortable with the gratitude. Is the woman in trouble now? Yes, serious trouble. Good. The word held years of witnessed injustices. Richard carefully chose his next words. Lily, the police need your testimony. You're a key witness. Fear flashed in her face. No, the police will put me into care. I understand your concern, Richard said. But this is bigger than me. Other people could be in danger. Lily's expression hardened. I told you what I heard. That's all I can do. Richard recognized the futility of pressing further. Instead, he changed tack. When was the last time you ate? The question took her by surprise. Yesterday. Some bloke gave me half a hot dog. Would you allow me to treat you to breakfast? No strings, just food. Suspicion warred with hunger in her eyes. Finally, hunger won. There's a greasy spoon on Baker Street. They don't kick me out if I've got money. 30 minutes later, they sat in a worn booth at Brenda's diner. Lily devoured pancakes and eggs with the intensity of someone who never knew when their next meal would come. Richard sipped coffee, giving her space to eat while he fielded urgent texts from his executive team and legal advisors. Your phone never stops buzzing, Lily observed between bites. People wondering why I'm not in the office, Richard replied. Yesterday was a bit eventful. Because someone tried to kill you. Richard winced at her bluntness. Yes, that does tend to disrupt one's schedule. Unexpectedly, Lily smiled. A quick flash that transformed her face from guarded to genuinely childlike. You talk funny. All formal. Side effect of board meetings, Richard said, returning her smile. Lily, may I ask how old you are? 11, almost 12. And how long have you been on your own? The smile vanished. A while. Richard didn't press further. I have a proposition for you. I need your help with the investigation. In return, I can offer you safe accommodation, meals, new clothes, whatever you need. You want to put me in foster care? Lily said flatly. No. I have a guest suite in my apartment. You'd have privacy, security, and no obligation beyond telling the police what you heard. Lily's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Because you saved my life without knowing me, Richard replied simply. And because I believe we can help each other. I don't see how I help you any more than I already did. Richard leaned forward slightly. Lily, according to the police, there are others involved in this scheme. Vanessa didn't work alone. Your testimony could help stop them before anyone else gets hurt. For a long moment, Lily stared at her empty plate. When she looked up, her blue eyes held a mix of caution and determination. 3 days. I'll stay for 3 days and talk to the police once, then I leave. That's my deal. Richard knew better than to push. Deal. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of Blackwood Tower, Richard's flagship residential building in Belgravia. As the private lift ascended, Lily stood perfectly still, her small backpack clutched to her chest. The lift requires a security key, Richard explained, sensing her anxiety. No one can access this floor without one. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Lily's composure finally broke. Her eyes widened as she took in the soaring ceilings, the wall of windows framing Hyde Park, the understated luxury of a home designed by London's most sought-after architect. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with Lily describing how she had escaped the restaurant after delivering her warning. Finally, Detective Inspector Davies clicked off the recorder. Lily, you've been incredibly helpful. Your testimony will be crucial to this investigation. Mrs. Green leaned forward. Is there anything else you want to tell Detective Inspector Davies? Anything you remembered while talking? Lily hesitated, then reached into her hoodie pocket. I've got this, Lily said, pulling out what looked like an old flip phone. Sometimes I find phones in the rubbish. This one still worked, so I kept it for emergencies. Lily handed it to the detective. After I heard them talking, I tried to record a bit. Don't know if it worked properly. Sounds bad. Inspector Davies accepted the phone with evident surprise. You recorded their conversation? Just a bit. Before they started getting into details about the special ingredient, Richard and Inspector Davies exchanged amazed glances. Potential audio evidence would significantly strengthen the case. Lily, this is extraordinary, Inspector Davies said. Can you give this to me as evidence? We'll get you a replacement. Keep it. Battery's nearly dead anyway. After Inspector Davies and Mrs. Green departed with promises to return the next day, Richard found himself alone with Lily in the suddenly silent penthouse. Are you all right? Richard asked, noticing her exhaustion. Yes. Lily looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Did I do good? You did more than good, Richard assured her. You were exceptional. Relief washed over her face. Can I go rest now? I'm really tired. Of course. I'll have Mrs. Lee bring dinner to your room later if you prefer. Lily nodded gratefully and retreated to the blue guest suite, leaving Richard to process the day's revelations. The recorded conversation, however brief, could prove decisive in building a case against Vanessa and her accomplices. More personally disturbing was the confirmation that their entire relationship had been orchestrated from the outset. A long, sophisticated scam targeting his fortune. Richard poured himself a whiskey and went to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. As night fell, lights twinkled across London like newly born stars. For the first time in years, Richard felt detached from the certainties that had defined his existence, his judgment, his self-sufficiency, his careful control over relationships. His phone rang, interrupting his introspection. It was Inspector Davies. Mr. Blackwood, we've analyzed the audio from Lily's phone. Despite the poor quality, it corroborates her testimony. We can clearly hear Miss Carmichael discussing payment to add something to your dessert. That's good news, Richard said. There's more. Miss Carmichael has regained consciousness. On learning of the evidence against her, she's offered to cooperate in exchange for sentencing consideration. What kind of cooperation? Names, dates, operational details. According to her initial statement, she's part of a network targeting wealthy individuals. Claims she was recruited after falling into debt with the wrong people. Do you believe her? Inspector Davies paused momentarily. Our background checks confirm she was legitimately employed in private wealth management. Had some gambling issues, lost her license, racked up debts. But that doesn't excuse targeting innocent people. No, Richard agreed. It doesn't. There's something else you should know, Inspector Davies added, her tone shifting. We've looked into Lily based on the little information we have. There's no record of a missing child matching her description. No foster care history, no school enrollment, nothing. How is that possible? We're still investigating. She may have been living outside the system for years, perhaps with a parent or guardian who kept her isolated, or worse. The implications were unsettling. A child with no official existence was vulnerable in ways Richard could barely comprehend. What about Lily after the 3 days? Richard asked. Normally, she'd enter the care system, most likely. Richard thought of Lily's fierce independence, her intelligence, her fundamental decency despite the circumstances that had driven her to the streets. What if there were alternatives? He asked carefully. Such as? I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to explore options before defaulting to the care system. Inspector Davies' voice softened slightly. Mr. Blackwood, I understand your gratitude towards Lily, but temporary guardianship is very different from long-term responsibility. I know, Richard replied. Just keep me informed of the next steps in the case. After ending the call, Richard instructed Mrs. Lee to prepare Lily's dinner and take it to her room. Then he contacted his legal team again, this time with specific questions about guardianship, adoption, and the rights of children with no official records. The next morning, Richard found Lily on the terrace, wrapped in a bathrobe, several sizes too large, her hair damp from the shower. Good morning, Richard greeted her. Your bathtub is big enough to swim in, Lily replied, which wasn't exactly a response. And the water stays hot forever. Richard smiled, recognizing luxuries he took for granted through Lily's eyes. As they ate breakfast, Richard noticed Lily studying him with unusual intensity. Finally, Lily put down her fork. Why are you so kind to me? The directness of the question was typical of Lily. Several reasons, Richard replied honestly. Gratitude, certainly, but also because I believe you deserve kindness. Everyone deserves it. Especially children. I'm not a regular kid, Lily said, fiddling with her pancakes. Not anymore. No, you're not. You're extraordinary. Lily looked up sharply, clearly unaccustomed to praise. The detective asked me about my parents yesterday after you left the room. Richard kept his expression neutral. What did you tell her? That I don't have any. Not anymore. I'm sorry, Lily. Lily shrugged with practiced indifference. It was a long time ago. My mum got sick when I was 7. After she was gone, I stayed with her friend for a bit. But that lady disappeared too. I managed fine on my own. The casual recitation of abandonment broke something in Richard's chest. Before he could reply, his phone vibrated with a message from Inspector Davies. Breakthrough in the case. Multiple arrests overnight. Need to speak to you and Lily as soon as possible. An hour later, Detective Inspector Davies arrived with Mrs. Green and a third person, a slender man in his early 40s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Blackwood, Lily. This is Dr. Ainsworth from Children's Services. Inspector Davies introduced them. Given the unusual circumstances, I thought it would be helpful for him to join us. Richard tensed slightly, aware of how quickly things were moving. They settled in the living room, where Inspector Davies brought them up to speed on the investigation's progress. Based on Miss Carmichael's cooperation and the evidence from Lily's recording, we executed search warrants at multiple locations last night. We arrested 4 individuals, including Julian Thorne, Miss Carmichael's primary accomplice. J, from the text messages, Richard clarified. Exactly. Thorne has been linked to at least 3 similar schemes targeting wealthy individuals. In 2 cases, the victims suffered serious health emergencies, but survived. In the third, Inspector Davies looked at Lily, clearly editing her words. The outcome was less fortunate. Were they all poisonings? Richard asked. Diverse methods, but yes. All involved introducing harmful substances. Miss Carmichael's role was typically to establish relationships with targets, gain their trust, and create opportunities for the incidents. Richard absorbed this information with growing horror. How many others had been deceived like him? How many hadn't had the fortune of having their own guardian angel appear at the crucial moment? Now, regarding Lily, Inspector Davies continued, turning to the girl who sat cross-legged on the sofa. Dr. Ainsworth is here to discuss the next steps. Dr. Ainsworth smiled warmly at Lily. First, I want to thank you for your bravery. What you did was extraordinary. Lily said nothing, her expression guarded. We haven't been able to find any records for you in our system, Dr. Ainsworth continued gently. Can you tell me your full name and date of birth? Lily, Lily said firmly. Just Lily, and I'm 11, almost 12. No surname? Lily shrugged. Maybe I had one. I don't remember it anymore. Dr. Ainsworth exchanged glances with Inspector Davies. Right, Lily. We need to find a safe, permanent place for you to live. Somewhere you can go to school, make friends, have a normal childhood. I was fine before, Lily insisted, though she lacked conviction. You were surviving, Dr. Ainsworth corrected gently. But children deserve more than just surviving. They deserve to thrive. Richard had remained silent during this exchange, but now he leaned forward. Dr. Ainsworth, what exactly are you proposing? Initially, an emergency foster placement while we establish Lily's legal identity. Then, depending on the circumstances, long-term fostering or possible adoption if suitable candidates come forward. Richard felt Lily tense beside him. Their 3-day agreement was fast approaching a critical juncture. What if I were to apply for temporary guardianship? Richard asked. The words emerged before Richard had fully processed them. As the legal details resolved themselves, 4 pairs of eyes turned to Richard in surprise. None more surprised than Lily's. Mr. Blackwood, Dr. Ainsworth began carefully. Guardianship is a significant responsibility, not a decision to be made impulsively out of gratitude. I am aware of that, Richard replied firmly, finding certainty as he spoke. But Lily and I have developed a relationship. She is comfortable here. It would provide stability during a turbulent time. While unusual, it's not unprecedented, Mrs. Green interjected, given the extraordinary circumstances and Mr. Blackwood's resources. Throughout this discussion, Lily had remained silent, her eyes darting from one adult to another as they debated her future. Finally, Lily spoke. Don't I get a say? The room fell silent. Dr. Ainsworth recovered first. Of course you do, Lily. What would you want? Lily looked at Richard, her expression a complex mixture of hope and weariness. Is this just because I helped you? Because you don't owe me anything. It's not about owing you, Richard said calmly. It's about doing the right thing for both of us. Lily considered this. Then she turned to Dr. Ainsworth. "I want to stay here, at least for now." The adults exchanged glances, a silent negotiation taking place over Lily's head. Finally, Inspector Davies spoke. "Given the unusual circumstances and Lily's role as a key witness, I believe we can arrange an emergency temporary guardianship while the formal process proceeds, with appropriate supervision, of course." Dr. Ainsworth nodded reluctantly. "I'll need to file the paperwork immediately, and Mr. Blackwood will schedule that home assessment for early next week." As the meeting concluded and the visitors prepared to leave, Richard felt a small hand slip into his. Looking down, he saw Lily gazing up at him with a mixture of uncertainty and something that with time and trust might become hope. "Did you mean it?" Lily asked when they were alone. "About wanting me to stay?" "Every word," Richard assured her. "But only if that's what you want to." Lily's answer was to squeeze his hand once, briefly but firmly, before letting go. A gesture more eloquent than any words. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, social worker visits, and gradual adjustments. The emergency temporary guardianship had been granted with surprising efficiency. A combination of Richard's resources, Detective Inspector Davies's advocacy, and the unusual circumstances of the case had fast-tracked a process normally mired in bureaucracy. For Lily, the transition from street survival to living in a Belgravia penthouse brought daily revelations. The concept of having her own space, reliable meals, and an adult who consistently kept his promises was uncharted territory. Lily approached each day with cautious optimism, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Richard to reveal that all of this was temporary charity that would soon expire. For Richard, the learning curve was equally steep. His orderly, predictable life had been upended by the presence of a child who asked direct questions, kept unusual hours, and viewed his world with unfiltered honesty. Mrs. Lee had been invaluable, helping to transform the guest suite into a proper bedroom with bright colors and age-appropriate furniture, guiding Richard through practical matters like school applications and pediatrician appointments. One crisp October morning, Richard found Lily at the breakfast table surrounded by shopping bags. "Did you buy out the entire shop?" Richard asked, accepting coffee from Mrs. Lee. "Mrs. Green took me shopping yesterday while you were in meetings," Lily explained. "She said I needed proper clothes for tomorrow's hearing." The hearing, a formality to extend Richard's temporary guardianship while the adoption process proceeded, weighed on both their minds. Despite assurances from Richard's legal team that everything was progressing smoothly, Lily remained anxious. "Want to show me what you chose?" Richard asked, sensing her need for distraction. Lily pulled out a navy blue dress with a white collar, simple but elegant. "Mrs. Green said this looks respectful but not pretentious." "I don't know what pretentious means." "It means trying too hard to impress people," Richard explained. "And she's right. That dress is perfect." Lily ran her fingers over the fabric. "It's the most expensive thing I've ever owned." Richard felt the familiar pang that often accompanied Lily's observations about her former life. "You had your preliminary meeting with Judge Thompson, didn't you? What did you think of her?" "She was kind. She asked me a lot of questions about living here, if I felt safe, if I was happy." Lily pushed her cereal around the bowl. "I told her the truth, which is that I never thought I'd have a real home again, but I'm starting to believe this might be." The simple statement struck Richard with unexpected force. This child, who had been let down by every adult in her life, was cautiously extending trust to him. A gift more valuable than any deal he had ever closed. "It is," Richard assured her. "No matter what happens in court tomorrow, this is your home for as long as you want it to be." A small smile flitted across Lily's face before she changed the subject. "Detective Inspector Davies called yesterday. Said they arrested more people connected to the case." Richard nodded. The investigation had expanded dramatically in recent weeks. What initially seemed an isolated incident had revealed itself to be an elaborate network targeting wealthy individuals across the UK. Vanessa, whose real name turned out to be Eleanor Marshall, was cooperating fully with authorities, exchanging information for consideration in her eventual sentencing. But this is just the beginning of the story. What happens next will change everything. Secrets will be revealed, lives will be shattered, and love will be tested in ways you never imagined.